Good morning, everyone. We are in the midst of learning the 11th chapter of the Iggeret HaKodesh portion of the Tanya. And the main point that we're going to be discussing is to explain how every single thing is from Hashem. And since Hashem is the epitome of good, therefore everything that He does is good. Not just for the good, rather is good. As an introduction to this chapter, I would like to share with you two stories that are quoted in the Talmud. The first story is a story about Rabbi Nachum Ish Gamzu. He was in the time of the Mishnah, and the reason why Rabbi Nachum was called Ish Gamzu, a man of Gamzu, is because he always used to say, Gamzu Litova. This is also for the good. The second story is going to be about Rabbi Akiva, and he would always say a similar statement, and as we'll see soon, that it was a bit different. He would say in Aramaic, Kol ma da avid rachamana litav avid. Everything that Hashem does is for the good. Seems similar, but let's go to the stories. The first story of Rabbi Nachum Ish Gamzu was that the Jewish people here in Israel once wanted to send a special gift to the Caesar in Rome, to the Caesar. And they decided who would be the perfect person to send this gift with. Would be the Rebbe himself, Rabbi Nachum Ish Gamzu. He would be the best person to represent all of Am Yisrael here in Israel. And so they prepared a special chest of the most beautiful stones and precious pearls. And he set off on his way. And he set off on his trip. On the way to Rome, he stopped off in a motel of some sort to stay overnight. And while he was there, the owners of the hotel saw that he had a precious chest, and they emptied all of the beautiful stones, and they filled up the box with sand, earth, and stones from right near the hotel. And they closed it back up, they put it back in its place, and he continued on his way. He had no idea what they had done. He comes to Rome, and he stands in front of the Caesar, in front of the Caesar. And he says, Your Majesty, it is my honor to present to you a special gift on behalf of the Jewish community in Eretz Yisrael. Wow. He presents the chest. They open the chest right in front of the king, and he becomes furious. He says, the Jewish people are making a joke out of me. At this point, Rabbi Nachum Ish Gamzu says, as he always used to say, Gam zu letova. Also this is for the good. The king starts to scream and he says, Nachum Ish Gamzu and all of the Jewish community in Israel should be killed. At that moment, the Talmud says that Eliyahu Hanavi came down into the world, into this world, acting as if he's one of the guards in the king's palace, and he says, Your Majesty, please wait a moment. Don't be so quick to send them to be killed. After all, these Jews are the children of Avraham Avinu. And Avraham Avinu, in Parashat Lech Lecha, when the four kings had a war against the 5 kings, and the 4 kings won, and they had Lot. And Avraham wanted to rescue Lot. And so he fought against the 4 kings and won. How did he fight against them? He took earth and he threw it at them, and that earth turned into swords. And he won the war. You are right now, Your Majesty, you're right now in the middle of a war with one city that you're having great trouble in conquering, in bringing a victory. Why didn't you try it? And so, with having nothing to lose, the Caesar took this earth that Nachum Ish Gamzu brought with him, and they won the war. They threw it, it turned into swords and spears, and they won the war. Now the king said, let's repay the Jewish community in Israel. And they sent wagon loads of jewels and precious diamonds back to Israel. Well, on the way back, they stopped off at the same hotel as Nachum Ish Gamzu came to Rome. And they were surprised to see that he was alive. And so they said to him, what happened? He told them the story. They right away they destroyed the hotel, and they took bags and bags of earth, hoping that this earth would also do the same job as the original chest that Nachum Ish Gamzu brought. And when they came to the Caesar in Rome, they said, this is the same stuff. They tried it, and of course it just was regular earth, and the king sent them all to be killed instead of mocking the king. Just one moment, please. I'm going to check to make sure that this is working. Okay, thank you for your comments, and I just made sure that it's working, and now we're back to our subject. And so Nachum Ish Gamzu said, Gam zu l'tova. Also this is for the good. Even though he could have been very afraid, and legitimately so, for coming to the king, and as far as he was concerned, it was full of precious diamonds. But even in the most difficult situation, he was able to have complete faith in Hashem, that Gam zu l'tova, this is also for the good. And as it proved afterwards to be so, that the earth itself, which at first glance was not anywhere near precious stones, all of a sudden it became swords, and it helped the king be victorious in his war. Now there's another story from the Talmud in Brachot, tractate Brachot, and the Talmud tells the story of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was known to say, Kol ma da'avid rachmana letav avid. Everything that Hashem does is for the good. And the Gemara tells a story that Rabbi Akiva was once traveling on the way, and when he traveled, he had his donkey, he had his rooster, and he had a candle. We see, by the way, what was important for Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is a scholar, and even from the quote-unquote simple things that a tzaddik does, we're able to learn a lesson from. What was important for him? To have a donkey that can carry his stuff, a rooster that can wake him up at midnight and say Tikkun Chatzot, and a candle to be able to light up during the night when he learned Torah. He should be able to see the Sefer, should be able to read along. And so on his way, he wanted to stop off in a town overnight. And then he was planning to continue the next day. And so he knocked on some doors. No one let him in. It turned out to be a town of evil people. He felt obviously very distraught, but no one let him in. So he turned to Hashem and said, Kol ma da'avid rachmana letav avid. Everything that Hashem does is for the good. And so, just outside the town There was a little forest with trees. He set up right outside, and he lit the candle, and he was able to learn Torah, and then he laid to sleep. All of a sudden, a lion came and ate up the donkey. A cat or something from the family of the cats or the tigers came and ate the rooster, and a wind came and blew out the candle. Of course, once again, Rabbi Akiva says, Kol ma da'avid rachmana l'tav avid. Everything Hashem does is for the good. Then, a short while later, he hears lots of noise coming from that town. And it was kind of scary. But it turns out that there were robbers and bandits who came and took over the town, killed people, and Rabbi Akiva's life was spared. Number one, because he was not in one of those homes. Number two, that if the donkey and the rooster would have been there, they certainly would have made noise, and the robbers would have seen Rabbi Akiva, and the candle would have lit, obviously, there would have been light. And the robbers would have seen Rabbi Akiva and, God forbid, killed him or taken him away. And so, once again, we have Rabbi Akiva, that he would say, Kol ma da'avid rachmana l'tav avid. Whatever Hashem does is for the good. If we pay attention to these two stories, we will learn that there is a slight difference between the two. Rabbi Nachum ish gamzu, he would say, Gamzu l'tova. Also this is for the good. He tried to see in every scenario how it's for the good. Rabbi Akiva, on the other hand, he said, Kol ma da'avid rachmana, whatever Hashem does, l'tav avid, he does it for the good. Not necessarily is this item itself good, or at least I don't see how it's good, but as an outcome, what's going to come from that, it will be litav, or in Hebrew, litov, for the good. So it's a little bit of a lower level of not necessarily the item itself being good. In other words, the killing of the donkey, and the eating of the rooster, and the blowing out of the candle doesn't seem itself to be good, but it's for the good. An outcome out of that came good. Not allowing Rabbi Akiva to come into their homes was not good, or it didn't seem good. But it turned out to be for the good. It wasn't necessarily terribly comfortable for him to set up shop in the forest, just in the outskirts of the town. But it was litav, for the good, as opposed to Nachum ish gamzu, that he tried to see in the item itself that it was for the good. The very same earth that was a terrible threat to his life, that same very earth was used to help the king, the Caesar, win his war. Interestingly enough, Rabbi Akiva was a student of Rabbi Nachum ish gamzu. And the more the generations go along, and there becomes the galut, as we know, the Rabbi Akiva was in the time just after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, and the famous story in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, that he went with his friends, and they saw a fox coming out of the place of the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And so as galut continues and develops from generation to generation, there becomes less and less revelation of Hashem, of godliness in this world. And so therefore, at the time of the Beit HaMikdash, when we have revelation of Hashem, it's much easier to see within every item how it's good, or at least to be sure that it's good. But as the galut, as exile begins, so we see less and less revelation of Hashem, of godliness in this world. Another interesting point is that what Rabbi Nachum ish gamzu said was in Hebrew, Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language, Gamzu l'tova. this is also litova, for the good. As opposed to Rabbi Akiva, he already said in Aramaic. Aramaic is similar to Hebrew, but it's different. It's already a foreign language. The language of the Talmud. It's already not exactly Lashon HaKodesh. And therefore he said his statement in Aramaic. Kol ma da'avid rachmana l'tav avid. Everything that Hashem does is for the good. The fact that it's not in Lashon HaKodesh, that's already one step less from the revelation of Hashem. Lashon HaKodesh, that's a great revelation of godliness, in a sense. But making the statement in Aramaic, that indicates, on some level at least, a little bit less of a level of revelation of godliness. So in summary, what do we have over here? We have two stories of tzaddikim from the time of the Mishnah, Rabbi Nachum Ish Gamzu and Rabbi Akiva, which they teach us a perspective of how we're supposed to view every single thing that happens to us in this world. When something is clearly good, a simcha, success in parnasa, Bezrat Hashem, then obviously we thank Hashem. Wow, Hashem is good, Hashem is great. But when, God forbid, something happens which is not so great, then naturally we start to be concerned. What's our perspective supposed to be like? We're supposed to be focusing on the positive. Since Hashem is good, and everything Hashem does is good, it must be that what's happening is in some way, shape, or form for the good. Whether something good should happen from it, or this itself is good. I would like to suggest that what the Alter Rebbe is stating over here in the Tanya, we're going to be learning this as we learn in the text, in the continuation of these classes, is perhaps a step further. Because at the end of the day, of course, Rabbi Akiva was unable to see within the occurrences that happened to him the good, but he knew that from this will definitely come good. Even Nachum Ish Gamzu, he believed that Gamzu, also this occurrence that happened, that the Caesar found earth instead of precious diamonds and pearls, that was also litova, for the good. This itself, it was litova, for a good purpose. However, the Alter Rebbe is going to explain to us something very deep. And this we'll hopefully understand as we follow along in chapter 11 of the Iggeret HaKodesh and the Tanya. Something very, very deep and very difficult to understand. That every single thing that happens from Hashem is good. There is absolutely no reason to be concerned or to weep or to be pained when something negative, seemingly negative, happens in a person's life. Even in the most mundane things that happen in our lives, every single thing that happens is good. Because by definition, Hashem does everything. And Hashem is good. 1 + 1 = 2. Everything that Hashem does is good, not just for the good, for something else that might come from it, but it itself is good. Now it's clear that us, as human beings, naturally, it's very, very difficult for us to come to terms with such a concept. Because we have a rule that ein l'dayan ela ma she'einav ra'ot. A judge or person that sees things in the world, we see what we see. We don't have a laser vision that's able to see the depth and the pnimiyut, the innermost meaning of what's happening. We see what happens. God forbid, when we see destruction, we cry and we mourn. A tzaddik, on the other hand, a righteous person, has a laser vision. A tzaddik is able to see within every situation the pnimiyut, the innermost intention, and how everything is good. For us, regular people, it's difficult. Because for us, we are human beings. We see what happens around us, and we take it for what we see. Not on a deeper level. We don't have that ability. So how does Hashem expect of us that we should be able to look beneath the surface? It's very, very difficult. But the best thing that I can suggest is to learn Chassidut. When we learn Tanya, when we learn Chassidut, which deals with the Pnimiyut, Chassidut is unique because it teaches us about Hashem. It teaches us about our neshama. It teaches us about our potential. The more we will learn about who we are and the ability that we have, the more we learn about the greatness of Hashem, these deep, lofty concepts will become more and more part of us. And therefore, it's so important that in this time, in this needy time, when everyone is so uptight and tense, to be able to learn Chassidut. You can learn from the comfort of your own home. Not only these classes that we're doing now, but also on our website, JerusalemChabad.org. There is a wealth of knowledge. And this will hopefully give us an ability to be able to have a different perspective on what's happening around us. And Bezrat Hashem, this moment, we shouldn't have to wait even one more moment. We should be able to see in the most revealed sense of the word. We should be able to see how Hashem is good, and everything that's happening right now is good, and the ultimate good is with the coming of Mashiach. I want to mention just one more thing before we end the lesson today, and that is taking an example from something that happened just about 70, 80 years ago. The Shoah, the Second World War, with so much death and torture in our Am Yisrael, and for probably another 13 million other people. And whatever the number is, it's something which is very hard for us to forget. And we are living with people who experienced the Shoah. As the phrase goes, I saw the eyes that saw. Even if we ourselves did not experience the Shoah, but it's enough to look into the eyes of Holocaust survivors and to see the terror and havoc that they experienced that never goes away. That never goes away from their eyes and never goes away from us that we witness to see their own eyes. And in the years following the war, there were many people who wrote to the Rebbe to ask the Rebbe for advice and guidance and inspiration on how to view, why did Hashem do this? After all, Hashem does everything. Why? How could Hashem have done allowed to happen such atrocities? And there were many rabbis and leaders that tried to advocate and give reason why the war happened. But the Rebbe never tried to reason and to explain why the Shoah happened. Rather, the Rebbe would give a metaphor for us to understand how it's impossible to understand Hashem's ways. The Rebbe said that a person walks into a room and you see a person lying on a table and a bunch of murderers standing around the table with knives, cutting him open, and he's bleeding all over. And when you walk into this room, you start screaming, "Murderers! Murderers! What are you doing? You're cutting him open!" So one person turns to this guy that walks in and says to him, "What are you doing? You're totally nuts. Do you know where you are? Do you know what's happening in this room? You are in a hospital, in the surgery room. And this person just had a terrible occurrence. And the people, the tzaddikim, the righteous people standing around are doctors, surgeons, and they're saving the person's life. So you walk off the street and you think that these people are murderers? And in fact, these people are saving the person's life. So we are like the person who walks in and we see things that happen, and we see terrible, terrible things, and they seem terrible. And we have to cry out to Hashem that this should never happen again. On the other hand, we have to realize and believe and be certain that every single thing that Hashem does is good. It's very hard to say these words, but it's the truth. And I want to finish off with a blessing. The bracha that I give is that we have to pray to Hashem that everything should be revealed good. The Rebbe would give a bracha that it should be good, bitov hanir'eh v'hanigleh, a revealed and an obvious good. It's not enough that we know that everything is good, not only for the good. We have to pray to Hashem that from this moment and on, everything will be good that we can relate to. Not just trusting that for sure in the higher realms things are good and for the good. Rather, we need to be able to see with our own eyes how it's good. When Mashiach comes, then we will see how everything is good. And Bezrat Hashem, we should pray to Hashem that really everything should be in a revealed good. And I thank you all for joining us. Bezrat Hashem every morning, 9:30 to 10. Jerusalem time, Israel time. We're going to be continuing tomorrow, chapter 11 in Iggeret HaKodesh in the Tanya. You might want to pick up or download from our website, jerusalemchabad.org, the text in Hebrew or in English. It begins Lahaskil Chabina. You can also see, excuse me please, on the Facebook page, you should be able to see the text that we posted yesterday of this chapter.